Hello and welcome to Coffee with Dr. Carla. I am Dr. Carla. This is Christine, and we are so glad that you're here with us today. Our goal today is to talk about some mental health related issues and hopefully start to end the stigma surrounding them. So, I know that the clients that come into my office struggle with this, and I mean, so do I. I think many people struggle with this at varying degrees, but I had a thought, and therefore it consumes me or it um I don't know, like I have to act on it, so I thought it, so I must do something about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so there's this thing like, oh my God, this thought popped into my head, right?
Right.
And so that's a scary place to be, right?
Right. Or like this thought popped into my head, and so it has to mean something all the time. I think we somehow turn into dream analysts and we're like, well, what is this? What's the deeper layer on this?
Right. And because it's a weird thought or a bad thought or maybe a negative thought, I must be somehow flawed
Right.
or broken or whatever the case may be.
Yes. Yeah. I think that um, the thoughts that we have about ourselves can be inspiring or dangerous, right? And we often feel like if we
Yeah.
have a thought, there is something we have to act on. But I found it to be when I was going through classes and things like that, just a very freeing concept that you can have a thought come into your head and not have to do anything about it or even believe it.
Right.
The idea that your brain lies to you sometimes
All the
was
time
really
because it's trying to
powerful.
keep you protected, right? Like
Right.
that's an instinctual thing that got built into our brains is that we're going to believe all these negative things because that's what kept
Right.
us alive in caveman time.
Right. And
There's
nobody told me that when I was younger, that everything you thought about yourself did not have to be something that you soaked in
oh
about yourself,
no
you
way did
know?
we talk about that.
That's not
Yeah.
a thing, but I think that's a really freeing concept. The idea that you could have a thought and evaluate it just like you would an email that comes into your box or research that you're reading, right? You look at it and you decide, well, does this make sense the way that they did this? Does the process for how they came to this answer make sense? Is this helpful for me? Is it important to me? And if the answer to those things are no, right, you just leave the email. You you close out of it and you don't think about it the rest of the
Or you
time.
delete it.
But
Right.
we've never thought about our thoughts like that, or a lot of us haven't. At least I hadn't. Um,
Yeah, I will say that when I went back to school, there was some conversation around this. However, it wasn't until I was in my internship that someone took like those cognitive behavioral um, thought cycle type things and put it in something that made sense that not only that I could take, but that I could teach to my clients, right?
hmm
And and then once he gave me this thought cycle and he kind of talked me through it, basically it went, situation happens, an automatic thought pops up,
hmm
right? But we know that often those thoughts go that fast unless we decide we're going to ruminate on them
Right.
over and over again, and then we have these feelings around it, and then our core beliefs are activated, usually negative core beliefs, and then we do something, some behavior comes out, and then there's some consequence, and then the
hmm
whole thing starts over again. It happens for positive stuff too, but we don't positive stuff doesn't create problems for us, the
Right.
negative stuff does, right?
Right.
And so I kept thinking after he's teaching this, and then he's telling the clients like this is how your negative thought cycle works, and I'm thinking, well, that's nice, but like what, okay, so now I know how my thoughts work, which is useful, right?
Right.
But what do I do about it, right? And so um, I started messing around with it and started saying, okay, well, what if you just noticed your thoughts?
hmm
Okay, thought, I see you. That's it. I'm just going to recognize that you're there, right? And then what if you then start to analyze those thoughts? And so the way I do it is, okay, so where's the evidence?
Right.
Oh my God, I'm such a loser. I can't believe I did that. Okay, is there evidence that I'm such a loser? Well, yeah, look at da-da-da. Okay, is it real evidence? Like, you know, and sometimes evidence like, oh my gosh, I really blew that. Is there
hmm
evidence? Yeah, like I totally slept through that appointment. So I did blow it, right? But so it's a realistic
Right.
like thing, right? That I did blow it,
Right.
right? But then you get to do something about it from there, as opposed
Right.
to I'm always blowing things, which really
Right. And does this one act really define me as a human being?
And is
Or
it
is it just how I handle
always
this
right?
one thing,
Right,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Right.
So, yeah, having those thoughts, and then so okay, so you recognize that a thought comes up in your brain. We can analyze it. We can challenge it.
Well,
We can do
even that was a huge thing for me. And
right.
as you were talking about, like in school, you had an example that came up for you that really made that something that you understood. I had that moment happen when learning a little bit more about acceptance and
Yeah,
commitment therapy or ACT therapy, because they talk about that, this cognitive dissonance. And it's basically that idea that you can kind of set your thoughts to the side. They use this really good visual of like, if you imagine your thoughts are your hands, right? And if you're trying to see the world all the time through your hands, that's how you're seeing your world is through your thoughts. And if you start with them really close up here, if this
right.
is kind of what happens when you think that every thought you have has to be true, right? They're all up in your face. That's all you can think about
Or
is the
have to
thoughts
be
that you're
dealt with as
having.
well, right?
Right. But if you can separate yourself from them and start to move them away, you can start to see the world for what it is. You can start to evaluate that and look at that from kind of that aerial view and see, all right, is this useful? Is this realistic? And if it's not, you can just kind of send it on its way.
Right,
Um, that visual was very powerful for me, because when I find myself in that spot where I'm ruminating on things, now I can say, stop, right? Your thoughts are really up close. This is all that you're seeing is this one thought that you had about yourself or about the world or about what this person said. And let's pull back. Let's look at those things. Like you said, where's the evidence? I love that question.
yeah,
Where's the evidence of this? And now let's see if this is something that I need to take with me, or if this is something that I can just kind of let go.
yeah. And it's so hard. And and what I have found, personal experience as well as working with clients, is that so often those negative thoughts that we have that come up in our mind, um, are not there, by happenstance. Like,
Right.
there's usually somebody else feeding them. Not always, but for instance, if you grew up uh and you were really sensitive and you cried easily and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're so emotional, you're so emotional, you're so emotional, why are you being such a crybaby, right? you know 15, 20 years later, all of a sudden you feel like this really strong emotion towards something. You're like, oh my god, I'm so emotional, I'm being such a crybaby about it.
And that's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing, right? Like, you are allowed to be emotional, you are allowed to cry.
Right.
I'm sorry, being affected by something and being emotional about it is healthy, right?
Yes.
Shutting it down is unhealthy,
Yes.
right?
I
But
always
if
think
you
of that Jewel song where she says, I'm sensitive and I'd like to stay that way. I'm like, ooh, that's a good one.
Ex
Remind yourself, right?
exactly. Like, why would you want to shut it off, right? And I think so many people are like, well, I want to just shut off all the, uncomfortable or
Hmm.
negative emotions. I'm like, yeah, but it's only one light switch. If you shut it off, everything goes away. So,
Right.
but, so a lot of those messages came from other interactions, other
Yeah.
places, perhaps childhood, right? Sorry, mom and dad, like, we hate to blame you for everything. I'm a parent, so like, I'm sure I'm blamed for a lot too. But the reality is, there's things that we say to our children or to our loved ones that we don't even realize what they're saying, or
Hmm.
what we're saying is impacting them, right?
Right.
And so that negative mindset gets stuck in people's heads,
Hmm.
right? So to break that is so very difficult.
Right. Right. It's really looking at a little bit more of where those things came from sometimes. And I don't know that you always have to have all the insight into where it came from to let it go, but it can be helpful if you're trying to
Yeah,
figure it out.
I think there's a place to understand where it came from. But in my work, when I say to somebody, like, if they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sensitive, I'm way too sensitive for my own good. Okay, where's the evidence?
Hmm.
Well, everyone says so. Really? Who's everyone? Well, my
Hmm.
mom and dad. Okay. Who else says so?
Right.
And I said, do I say so? Well, no, you're weird. Okay, I understand I'm weird, but that's fine. But am I telling you you're too sensitive? No. How about your best friend? Are they telling you you're too sensitive? Well, no. How about your
Or even how
partner?
is it impacting you?
Right, right.
Right.
So, like, all these different things. And what happens when you're not too sensitive?
Hmm.
How does life, come at you then, right?
Right.
And so it's those different things. So I think there's a place. Unfortunately, a lot of times people can't do that by themselves, so
Right.
they need to get help.
Yes. I think that's hard to sort out all on your own, for sure.
It's a lot to sort out on your own. and I don't want this conversation to be construed as like, oh, all of a sudden a light bulb went on, for us alone. No, it was
Hmm.
somebody teaching it to me
Yes.
that made the light bulb go off. And even though I know these truths, right, I still struggle with negative thoughts.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and it's easy to have things stick to you. A comment that stays with you for your day or makes you feel really cruddy and changes the way you kind of do things for that day or week or whatever. But it is a process, I think.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. So I think the biggest piece of advice we can give is like, if this is something you're struggling with, which most people are, get help. Get help. It's okay to get help.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever that might be. It might be reading a good book. It might be listening to some podcasts. It might be going to see a therapist. Right. But getting help can take on so many of those different challenges that people are facing. So remember, you can change your thoughts, discover your potential, and transform your life by focusing on your overall well being. So until next time, continue working on being the best you possible. Bye.